Daf Chof Tes Amud Aleph will begin Daf Chof Ches Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. We are searching for who the Tana of our Mishnah is. Our Mishnah says that Chometz of a Nochri Shavrel of a Pesach is Mutter B'Hano. If it's Chometz of the Goy who's overall, it's Mutter B'Hano, Shel Yisrael, it's also B'Hano. It says Shenemer Lo Yira L'cha Asor. So we are wondering, the more is questioning, who is the Tana of our Mishnah? Because we have a brisa that reflects the opinion of different Tanoim, and it seems that none of them jive with the opinion of the Tana of our Mishnah. Because we have a brisa that said that Chometz bein lifnei zmana bein la'achar zmana is your over with a lav. Tayach zmana, there's lav v'koros. That's what Rav Yehuda says. Rav Yehuda says both lifnei zmana la'achar zmana is a lav. Tayach zmana is a lav v'koros. Rav Shimon says Chometz lifnei zmana la'achar zmana, you're not over a lav at all. Tayach zmana, you're over a lav v'koros. And we have Rav Yossi Galili who says that Chometz, even on Pesach, is Mutter B'Hano. So the question is, who's the Tana of our Mishnah? So, back to Gemara, Mani Masnisa. Who is the Tana of our Mishnah? Rav Yehuda, if you'll say it's Rav Yehuda, Chometz Doma Kom. Rav Yehuda said that Chometz before Pesach, after Pesach, is also B'Hano. He doesn't say Chometz of whom. He doesn't say which type of Chometz. So he says Stom Chometz Stomach or Afilud Nochri, which would imply even of a Nochri, that even of the Chometz of a Nochri Shavrel of a Pesach would be also be allowed. V'i Rabbi Shimon, and if it's Rabbi Shimon, Dirshu Nami Mishesh Kashori, he holds that there's no lav even by a yid. It's only on Pesach. V'i Rabbi Yossi Galili, and if it's Rabbi Galili, Afilu Teiach Zmana Nami Mishesh Kashori B'Hano. If it's Rabbi Yossi Galili, he says even Chometz on Pesach is Mutter B'Hano. So therefore, who is the Tana? Now it's Rashi from Rashi that when we say that according to Rav Shimon, that the Yisrael Nami Misha Kashori, he holds that even if a Yid is mutter after Pesach, Chometz Shavrel of a Pesach, that he says it's B'Hano, that's mutter B'Hano. It's mashma that he is moida that la'achila it would be also. It's only Chometz Shavrel of Pesach of Yisrael that it's mutter B'Hano, but by achila it would be also. The Chreinim a search for the makor that how could we say such a chilek? But I'll call upon him. Who is the Tana of our Mishnah that is machalek between Chometz Shavrel of a Pesach of Yisrael and Nochri, and we say by a Yisrael it's also, by a Nochri that there is no Isur. Amar Rav Acha Yaakov L'Olam Rabbi Yehudi. Really, I'll tell you the Tana of our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. V'yoliv sor da'achila misor da'riyah. And he learns out the sor of achila from sor of riyah, from the Isur, from the lav of Bal Yira, Bal Yamatz. So, therefore, even though he learns out that there is a lav of Chometz Shavrel of Pesach, but there's an exclusion for the Chometz of a Nochri. Just like there's an exclusion of a Chometz of a Nochri for the lav of Bal Yira, Bal Yamatz. Masor the riyah, just like the riyah shelcha. It says l'cha shelcha yitaroy. You can't have your chometz. Your chometz cannot be seen on Pesach. Cannot be in your possession. Your chometz. Aval ataroy shelacher mishel gavoya. But there's no lav of bal yira bal yamatz on chometz that belongs to a nochri or chometz that belongs to hektish. There's no isur bal yira on that. Similarly, by achila, there's an isser of eating chometz, your chometz, but there's no chometzdiki isser of eating chometz shalacher shel gavaya. There's no isser on that of the chometz. And really, you should say that even ba'achila, that not only the Chometz Shavrel of Pesach is mutter by Hano, that of a Nochri it's mutter by Hano, it's even mutter by achila. It could have said that because there's no Yisr to begin with of the Chometz of a Nochri. But v'aydi the Tana Yisrael also b'hana. But since it says by Yisrael that it's also b'hana, meaning certainly it's also b'achila, but it's telling you it's even also b'hana. So it says it in terms of Isra hana. Tana nami den hakri muter b'hana. It says by a nachri that it's muter b'hana, but it's also muter b'achila because there's no Isra of the chametz of a nachri. Ubedin hu the iboy lemisnei should have said afilo teich zmana muter. Well, if there's no Isra of the chametz of a nachri, that means theoretically on Pesach, at least midaraisa, according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, you can eat the chametz of a nachri, even on Pesach. But vaydet han Yisrael la'achar zmana, tanenami denachre la'achar zmana. But since for the Yisrael, it's telling you the Yisrael la'achar zmana, it tells you the nachri, the heter la'achar zmana, but theoretically it's even muter toich zmana midaraisa. So that's the way Rashi learns that toich zmanai, it would be muter even to eat the chametz of a nachri in a Torah. Taisus asks on this, he says, how could that be? Once he takes it, he's eating it, it becomes his. So it's no longer the nachri. Once he takes it and now he's eating it, it's his. So it's chametz shaloi. So enachami, theoretically that would be the case, but it's now not the nachris anymore. So therefore, Taisa says that not to say that it should say that toich zman is muter, meaning muter ba'achila, it's muter b'hano. It should be muter b'hano. But in economics, theoretically, he agrees that one would be able to eat it. But Lamaisi says that it's not considered the nachris anymore once the yid is eating it. So that's the chiddush shita that comes out according to this, at least the Havamina, the Rav Acha bar Yaakov, that it would be muter. The Kavod Shurim wonders, he says, if you hold that this shalcha yataroya, avol taroya shalachirim shel gavoya, if you hold that that applies also to the chametz of another yid, let's say Reuven has chametz, Shimon's chametz in his possession. It's not Reuven's, it's Shimon's. If there's no Bal Yeroim, then would you say the same thing? That there's no Isra Hano, there's no Isra Achila, theoretically? Would you say the same thing? He says no, because there is an Isra Bal Yeroim. It may not apply to Reuven, but there is an Isra Bal Yeroim on this chametz. Mashenkin of the Nachri, the chametz of the Nachri, there is no Isra Bal Yeroim. It doesn't apply to anybody. So that's one approach that our Tanatan of our Mishnah is reviewed. Rav Amar is a different approach. La'ilam Rabbi Shimon, I'll tell you the Tana is Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says that la'achar Pesach there's no lav, but nevertheless Rabbi Shimon can also kanius. But even though there's no lav, but midorabanan it is also chametz shalav Pesach is also midorabanan, since he was over bal yirav v'matzah hoil v'avarla b'val yirav aval yamatzah. Since he's over bal yirav v'yamatzah, the rabbanan give a knas, and therefore midorabanan the chametz shalav Pesach is also. There's a whole deal in the Rishonim. Do we say that this knas is only being over the deraisa bal yirav bal yamatzah? But let's say a person was Mekayim Tashbih, he was Mavatal the Chometz, but he wasn't Mavayir it. He wasn't Mekayim the Rabbanon of doing Badika and removing the Chometz. So he still has it in his possession. So the Rabbanon he has to do Badika. Let's say he was over. In such a case, do you say that there's also a Knas, or do you say no? So Rabbeinu Dovid and the Ramchal will say that even if he's only over the Rabbanon, the Knas still applies. But others learn not that way. The Chachmei Lunil, they say that no, that it's only if he's over the Deraisa, not the Rabbanon. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Rava, according to Rava, who says that this is a Knas. So he comes to tell you that he's a Knas. So we understand why the Mishnah says, Hainu diktani lo yero, Hainu diktani shel Yisrael also mishum shenemar lo yero. So we understand why the Mishnah, the Tana of the Mishnah says, of a Yid, it's also of lo mishum lo yero. Because what's the pshat? According to Rava, the Tana of the Mishnah is like Rav Shimon, and the Isser of chametz all over Pesach by a Yid is because since he's over Bal Yirol by a Matzah, that's why they counsel him. So we understand why the Tana of the Mishnah says Mishum Shenemar Lo Yirol. But according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, says the Tan is Rav Yehuda, and the Isser in question is an Isser D'oraisa, and Rav Yehuda learns it out from the Psukim of Lo Yachal Chometz. So why does it say Bal Yeroy? It has nothing to do with Bal Yeroy, Lo Yeroy. It has nothing to do with that. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Mishum Lo Yachal Chometz Mi Boile. That's why it should say, that's the policy that it should say why the chametz of a Yisrael is also. More answers, no. Misamar, the Sefer Koi, this policy that is quoted is not going on the Sefer and for the reason why shall Yisrael of a Yid is also. It's not going on the reason that shall Yisrael also. Our Reisha is going into the Reisha. And it's going on the ratio with why shall nochri is muter. Shall nochri shravel pesach muter ban. Why is it muter? Mishum shenemar lo yaralecha. It says lo yaralecha shel choya taroya aval taroya shel acher shel gavoya. So there's no Isser Bal Yeroy Shal Nochri V'Hala Sardach Hilam Yisar Dariya. That's what it's referring to. V'Haz L'Tamayu, and they follow their shitas that we learned elsewhere. The Itmar Ha'aychal Sar Shal Nochri Shavel of a Pesach. The person eats Sar the chametz of a Nochri Shavel of a Pesach L'Divrei Rav Yehuda. According to Rav Yehuda, Rav Amar like he's like it because he says there's no chilek between the chametz of a Nochri and the chametz of Yisrael. So Rav Amar like it, Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar ain't like it, but he says you're not like it. Rav Amar like it, lo yalef Rav Yehuda Sardach Hilam Yisar Dariya. So there's no chilek. But Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar ain't like it. There's no malchus because yalef Sardach Hilam Yisar Dariya. But the Gemara says v'hada bei Rav Acha bar Yaakov me'ahi. But he's chayzer from this. Rav Acha bar Yaakov is chayzer, and he retracts from it. And he says that no, we don't learn out, according to Rav Yehuda, we don't make this exclusion. The Sanya will learn the Braisa, Eichel Chametz Shel Hektish B'Moyed. If a person eats Chametz of Hektish on Chol HaMoyed, he said on the Moyed, Moal. If he eats it during Pesach, during the Moyed of Pesach, then he's Moal. Not to have a Chol HaMoyed, but during the Moyed of Pesach, he's Moal. And some say he's not moel. Man yeshamim. Who's the yesham? So before we prove that Rav Acha bar Yaakov was chayzer, we are going to bring down different shitas about who this yeshamim are. Then ultimately we'll get to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, and we'll see from his interpretation of who the yeshamim are, we'll see that he's chayzer from what he just said, from what we just brought down from what he said. So we have a machlokes if there is me'ila on the chametz of hektish on Pesach, or there is no me'ila. So Amar of Yochanan, who's the yeshem of Nechunya ben Akana? He says Nechunya ben Akana. The Sanya Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana hayu aises Yom Kippurim kishabes l'tashlumim. Now we have a principle of Kamalei b'derabminei, that if a person does an aver, if there's a chiyuv misa and there's a chiyuv tashlum of payment, we say that he's not chayiv for the payment because there's a chiyuv misa kamlei b'derabminei, because there's a more chomer punishment of misa, so there's no chiyuv tashlum. Now Nechunya ben Akana, he made also Yom Kippur where there's no misas bezin, but there's kores. He said also we apply the din of kamlei b'derabminei even in such a case. So he says, Ma Shabbos, just like Shabbos. We say that if there's a chilul Shabbos, and at the same time, at that be'idna, there's a chiyuv moment, mischayev benafshay, upotem in a tashlumim. So he has a chiyuv of misa, and he's mischayev benafshay, there's no obligation to pay. Upotem in a tashlumim, af Yom Kippurim, mischayev benafshay, he has a chiyuv nefesh. It's not misas bezin, it's chorus, but it's still a mischayev benafshay, poter min a tashlumim, is poter of tashlumim. So therefore, since there's chorus for eating chametz on Pesach, there's no me'ila obligation. There's no obligation to pay the penalty for me'ila because kamlei b'derabminei. That's what it means, and that's why it means that it says that there is no chiyuv of me'ila, of the payment of me'ila, because of kamlei b'derabminei. So Rashi speaks out. We have to be saying that the case is talking about where he is a mazid for pays for the chametz from Pesach. Otherwise, there's no chorus. He has to be a mazid. But in terms of milah, there's only milah for the shoygeg. So he was a shoygeg on the milah. He didn't realize this was hektish. He didn't realize. He knew it was chametz and he knew it was Pesach and it's also, but he didn't realize that it was hektish. So he's a shoygeg. So that's one approach. Rav Yosef Amar b'paidim es hakadshim lachilim leklovim kamiflik. Rav Yosef gives a different interpretation, and he says the machlokes is whether or not you can be paida kachim, where you paida but you can't eat it, you can feed it to the dogs. Are you allowed to be paida kachim on that basis? Now, Rashi says that these Tanoim do not hold like Rav Shimon. Because they held like Rav Shimon that Teich Zman is also ba'ano, and then everyone would agree, and there would be no machlokes over here, that you're potter. Because if Teich Zmana is also ba'ano, you can't get any benefit from it, not even though after Pesach you would be able to get hano. But that's only a davar garim l'momen. And davar garim l'momen is lav k'momen. It's not, they hold that it's not kimomen. So the fact that you'd be able to get benefit after Pesach, it is not considered like this has monetary value, so there would be no mi'ila. It's only mi'ila if you're moil on something that has monetary value. So therefore Rashi says, we're going according to Rav Yosef Galili, that he says that even Teich Zmana is mutar ba'ano. Now it's mutar ba'ano, but it's also ba'achil. So if you have, does this kachim, does this hektish, this chometz of hektish, does it have value? Does it have monetary value? And if it does, there would be milah. But if it doesn't, there's no milah. Well, what does it depend on? Well, you can't eat it, and you can't sell it to a yid to eat. So you can only be pointed to give it, to feed it to dogs, to feed it to klovim. You can get hana from it, because we're going according to Rav Yosef Galili, but you cannot eat it, or no yid can eat it. So can you be paida kachim where you cannot, a yid cannot eat it? So that's a machlokes over here. Ma domer mal, he says, kasavar paida is a kachim lachim leklovim. You can be paida the kachim to feed it to the klovim, and therefore it's considered to have monetary value, and therefore there's milah. Uman damar loimal kasavar ein poidim is kasavar ein poidim. He said you cannot be poida on that basis, and therefore, since you can't be poided and you can't eat it, it has no monetary value, and therefore there's no milah. That's the machlokes over here, and therefore we'll go through the different opinions of what the machlokes over here. We'll come to the shita of Rav Achi bar Yaakov, and therefore we'll see in the next Amud why we say he was chayzer from his previous position.